I won't sing the song. Hi, welcome to the Virtual News Show. Imagine spending 16 years dreaming and training for a dream job, and then you are told to quit by doctor's orders. How do you recover or at least cope with something like that? And cope with the debilitating head trauma that keeps compounding over the years. My guest today is Dave Matthew Boddy, and he has endured 15 concussions and bullying. He's lost his dream career in wrestling. He was recently diagnosed with a terrifying news about brain damage that he incurred from some of the concussions, and um, and yet this man does not give up. He is a beacon of hope and a light for youth. He is a champion of anti bullying campaigns. He tells his story so freely that he can help others. So, welcome, Dave. I'm interjecting into the video here because this is the part of the video that did not get recorded on the Facebook Live due to my first time user on the Be Live platform. So it is my bad. But anyway, Dave had described some of what he goes through on a daily basis with um, his concussion system symptoms, and also it's more than concussions, it's his entire body. He's in constant pain much of the time, and depression, anxiety, and brain damage are all part of the package. I will add a link to another interview with that I saw of him that wasn't that long ago, that where he does describe um, all of this in detail. And I had also asked him to explain, just talk about his wrestling career and his training to become a professional wrestler. And he also talked about some of the people he used to hang with, and where some of his injuries came from. He had many of them during his wrestling career, and one of them he was attacked, was hit by a shovel, and so that's another place his concussions come from. So it's quite a remarkable story. I will add this other link to the description in the YouTube video here to so that you can see the rest of the interview. But it was only like 15 minutes of it that went missing before I realized I didn't have him on the screen. So anyway, I will continue on with the rest of the interview, and it is quite good. So here you go.
To explain to people, it's a lot simpler because I share my story like an open book. I'm constantly putting out content about my daily struggles and what I'm dealing with, and it's helping people. So I started a thing that sorry, not a thing, but a movement called the Feel Real Journey, which is where you cannot heal until you feel real. And what happens is the hardest part about struggling is you feel like you have to suppress things. Like you have to be like, okay, I can't speak about my struggles, I can't speak about my weaknesses, or where I'm having the most difficulty, because people judge you. They call you weak. They say man up. They say toughen up. So you conceal everything. And my favorite thing to say is the more you suppress, the bigger the mess.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to like express your feelings. And like, I'm not ashamed to cry in front of anybody. I'll cry right now if I wanted to. I don't care, because I'm on a journey of just feeling real, where I feel everything. And I allow myself to grieve through it. Because if you start ignoring emotions, that's where things can get really tricky. And when it comes to concussions and brain injury, and the fact that everyone deals with it differently with different symptoms, you have to remember, okay, in order to recover, I have to actually be real with everything. I have to actually feel the way I feel and can't hide it. So another reason why I don't have to explain it too much to people is I'm constantly speaking of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to accept it and say, oh, it is what it is. It's just being my recent diagnosis and the evaluations I'm going through, it changed my mindset completely.
Wow. So how do you keep yourself going, Dave? Because I know you're fat, your wife is your rock. Um,
Yep.
but how, you, it can so easily get you down. I mean, all the stuff that you've gone through, it can so easily rob you of your psyche, and you could, if you're in constant pain, it has to drain you all the time. So how do you, get up every morning and just say, screw it, I'm just going to go motivate somebody?
You actually answered the question on point within the question. My one of my favorite quotes that I always speak about is one of the best ways to heal is to help other people heal with you. So when I'm having what I call a test day, the most common phrase is I'm having a bad day or today's a tough day. I always say it's a test day because internal vocabulary, it matters, the way you speak to yourself and the words you use. In the past, I'd say bad day, and I realized that psychologically I was sabotaging and hindering my recovery because I'm like, oh, it's a bad day. It's already done. So now I'm like, okay, you know what? Like today, actually, I posted that today was a test day.
Mhm.
I woke up with no motivation whatsoever. I had no ambition. I had no energy. And that's probably because the last few days I exerted a lot of mental energy just doing content and reading and interviews and whatnot. And so I expected it. And the way that I deal with these is I focus on strategies that I've learned in brain injury rehab, like resting, like actually resting. People think
Mhm.
sitting down watching TV is resting. That's not resting because your mind's still
Mhm.
active. It's still focusing on, it's still in motion. So resting for me is meditation. I absolutely love meditation. I always speak highly of it. It's been around for 2,500 plus years. Like it's working. It helps me a lot. I focus on mental grounding. I focus on reading. I focus on exercise. But most importantly, I focus on water. Like I have a strict routine where I wake up in the morning. I drink 3 glasses of cold water to wake my organs up. Wakes me up. I do a stretch. I do a quick 8 Fit workout, which is an amazing app, by the way. Um, I keep myself going just with the understanding that I know my life has value. Even
Mhm.
though I'm struggling, the struggle doesn't mean I lose value and worth. So I wake up every morning saying, you know what? I have a lot of friends who have lost. I've lost over 9 friends. And I know that they wish they could be here where I am right now, even though I'm struggling. I know they wish they can still be here. So I'm like, you know what? I got to show honor to my friends and pursue the happiness that I know that they would support me on. A lot of things drive me. My family, of course, having the responsibility of raising 2 kids, being engaged and planning a marriage or a wedding. Like I have so many things to keep me focused, but that doesn't make it easy.
No.
Because like I said, some days it's just you lose it, and I'm like, okay, I have to understand that there's only 2 things I can control in this world right now, and that's my effort and my focus. Like I have to understand that that's all on me. So when I woke up this morning, I said, okay, this is how I'm feeling. This is how I can overcome it. And you have to put more emphasis on the solution than the problem, because when you start just focusing on the problem, it drains you. I call it the stub toe. The stub toe. You wake up in the morning and you stub your toe. You have 2 choices. You can let that stub toe just ruin your whole day, or say, you know what, I'm going to deal with this. I'm just going to move past it. So the way I do it is I live in the moment. So this morning I woke up I'll be honest with you, I'm very depressed. I felt very sad. I just did not know why. I know why, but I don't know why,
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'm going to feel this. I'm going to grieve through it, and I'm just going to carry on. And it may happen again today, but I'll be prepared for it. And so it's just lots of preparation and lots of research and understanding and listening to the right voices. Like I used to have family that say, "Oh, you're fine, you'll get over it,"
Mhm.
but I knew the truth, and I'm like, no, okay, so all I can do is focus on what's real. And when I told my family my recent diagnosis, which was on November 12th, I saw a neurologist, and she said that my symptoms will most likely never heal, but they'll worsen as I age.
Wow.
So now I'm being evaluated for what's called permanent PCS, which is permanent post-concussion syndrome. I'm also being evaluated for dysthymia, which is a progressive permanent depression. So it's 2 very serious diagnoses. And my neurologist also spoke to me about CTE. She also spoke to me about dementia. I just told him, like, I need you to lay out everything that's possible and just let me just grieve and understand what the severity of it is. CTE is definitely one of my biggest fears
Mm-hmm.
because it's being more commonplace. It's being more understood. I'm not saying I have it,
Yeah.
but the neurologist said that the early stages of CTE usually show between the ages of 30 and 40.
Mm.
I'm 34 next month. So she said, you're showing all the signs. You haven't healed since 2006. My last concussion was 2011, and I'm still dealing with all those symptoms. So it's like when I got told the truth, it wasn't a truth I wanted,
Mm.
but now I know it. I can be like, okay, I'm going to alter my diet, which is a lot of brain power food, which is like grapes, kiwi, bananas, just natural organic stuff, lots of water, lots of rest. The hardest part right now that I'm struggling with is the financial part because I'm not diagnosed officially yet, and I'm off work due to injury. The government is no longer financially supporting me,
Mm.
so it's kind of like now I'm in the situation of okay, I gotta get these tests done, I gotta get diagnosed. That way, I can figure out the financial part. And I told my doctor the reason why my concussions never healed is because I was always under financial pressure.
Yeah.
Because, and that's common. Like people can't heal nowadays because they're like, oh, you can go on EI, but you only get paid like 65% of your wage. So you have to understand you just lost hundreds of dollars and your bills don't care. So that's the hardest part, I think, for recovery as an adult is how do you manage the finances as well as the recovery. And then sometimes you realize I can't do this.
Yeah.
When I was in rehab, in 2011, I was supposed to be there for 9 to 12 months, but I left within 5 months because of financial pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that decision led to where I am today because I didn't give myself time to heal. When I left the rehab, they tried to convince me to stay, but because they legally couldn't force me, I said, no, I got to go get back to work. I went back to work and haven't been the same since. Been fired numerous times. I've quit jobs, walked off jobs. Just mentally, I wasn't there. I wasn't in the right mental space to actually hold the job. And that's why over 50% of Canadians who are homeless have suffered brain damage or brain trauma in the past because it changes you. Like you just you don't know who you're going to become. You don't know how long it's going to last for. People they've now found that one concussion could be life altering, but where before it's like, oh no, you can have 2 or 3 concussions, you'll still be fine. But now they're saying no, one concussion can truly start the domino effect.
Yeah. I still feel some. I just had the one. I can't imagine 15, but I still have some residual effects. They're not quite as severe as they used to be, but yeah, I can. It does stay with
Oh,
you
you
for the
look
rest of your
fine though.
life. Yeah, I know. I look fine.
You look fine. Like my first ever concussion, I was 4 years old. 4. And I hit my head so hard on the side of a hideaway bed. That's how old I am. We used to have hideaway beds. I hit my head so hard on that I popped blood vessels in the right side of my
Well,
brain.
those
And
things were hard as rock.
I popped them, and my right side of the head, like a little spot, was like a sponge. You could push in my head, and you can feel it, the blood
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah.
And that was my first concussion. Then I had numerous concussions from bullying, and I had more concussions from football. And the number one truth to me is I have 15 documented concussions, but
You
there's
probably
a
have more
chance
than that. Yeah.
I have more,
Yeah.
but I can't document it or prove it.
No.
So that's the scary part about
Well, that should
concussions. When you
put
have
you
so
on
many of them,
disability as it is, but oh
you would
well.
think.
That's another. Let's talk about youth bullying too, because it is, obviously, it is something that you're very passionate about talking to youth about. And now, adults get bullied. I mean, I've talked about adult cyberbullying, and I've have my own cyberbully that's trying to mess up my footprint and all that stuff. And I've heard so many horror stories, and I wrote a book about business cyberbullying, and that can debilitate somebody's businesses. But youth, I mean, it starts somewhere. It starts in youth. And I think a lot of us have experienced it in school. But today, do you see it as just do you see it as kind of an epidemic? And how are adults contributing to this? Because you see adults behaving stupidly on social media, and you think, you wonder if those kids that are being bullies looking at what their parents are doing and thinking, oh well, that's okay to do it to somebody else. And I use that Swedish girl Greta Thunberg as an example. I mean, you see memes going around. Adults are pushing those memes and denigrating
Mm-hmm.
a 16-year-old girl, and we see it bigger than that. But so, do you see youth bullying as kind of an epidemic, or is it just adulting is not what it used to be?
First and foremost, the adults are unfortunately not leading by the example they want. And that's one thing that I am a former life coach of 7 years. I actually walked away from life coaching about 2 months ago due to my recent troubles. However, when I was doing life coaching, it was astronomical how many families I was supporting and just witnessing the behaviors of the adults and then connecting them to the behavior of the youth and realizing, okay, that's the correlation. Because numerous situations arise with bullying. First of all, I feel the word bullying is thrown around a lot more than it needs to be because bullying is consistent. It's a consistent behavioral thing. So if your son or your daughter comes home saying that a person called them a name, that's not bullying because that's a one-time situation. It's just name calling. It's not fun nonetheless, but it's not bullying. And I feel that that's one of the biggest issues is that term's thrown around all the time. Even, for example, on Twitter today, I saw someone gave constructive criticism to a fellow adult, and the response was, "Don't bully me." And I'm like, that wasn't bullying. Like now you guys are just using that word to grant, to garner attention. However, it is real. Depression, anxiety, unfortunately, youth suicide has drastically increased. I lost my best friend in 2004 due to suicide. He was part of the LGBT community. His family disowned him. When that happened, he unfortunately lost his life. I've lost 3 other people due to suicide that are close to me. It's very common, unfortunately. However, our current society, I believe, is a huge result of that. We have kids like just last week. I had a youth that's very close to my family. She was assaulted in her school while 3 girls recorded it on their cell phones, and then they shared it to social media. That's where youth mindset is right now. It's virality. Sorry, they want to go viral. So social media is definitely not helping with the situation. It definitely is an epidemic. The amount of youth that we're losing on a daily basis, over 160,000 youth every single day refuse to go to school due to safety concerns. Every 7 minutes there's a bullying situation on the playground in Canada. Like it's very common. It's always been an issue. Like when I was going through my bullying situations, it was never labeled as bullying. It was just teasing. It was just phases. But then they realized it was getting serious. Like for example, in grade 6, which was 1996, I was thrown down a flight of stairs, and then I had 2 males hold me while a third threw rocks and razor blades at my face. I was spat on. I was kicked. I dealt a lot with bullying. I actually suffered 3 concussions from bullying situations. One was a kid pulled a chair beneath me. I smacked back my head on a concrete wall, was dizzy immediately, started puking. The second one, I was climbing like this wooden structure that led to a slide. He kicked me off the slide, off the wooden structure. I hit my head in the back of a wooden frame of the playground. And the third was dodgeball. I peeked over and a kid waited and he threw the dodgeball right at my head, which knocked me out. So like bullying it's to the point where I tell people that it's happening. However, what's happening is it's not being dealt with accordingly. You see it everywhere. Schools saying we are against bullying. We have a strict policy on bullying. And I removed my son from school beginning of September this year due to bullying, due to mental health and anxiety issues. And I'm like, you got to take that sign off the door because it's not true. It's false. You guys have a strong stance. However, it's never enforced. There's no investigations launched. I also found that some schools will actually hide reports of bullying as an attempt to not lose funding. It was actually shared nationally here in Canada that some provinces don't legally have to do reports for violent acts between youth and another youth. That was very alarming, knowing that they don't have to have a report for it. I also found out that when students request ice packs, there's usually a report that goes along with it. And that's why sometimes kids don't get ice packs. They get, oh, it's fine, you're fine, because they don't want to do a report.
Wow.
So I feel the reason why bullying is increasing drastically on a yearly basis is because adults are not stepping foot forward and saying, okay, we're here for you. We want to help you. So individuals like myself and many other individuals that have, campaigns and organizations for bullying, we're stepping in saying, okay, we're going to help you, because many other people are turning their backs on you. And then to further what you said about how you see adults reacting, it's so true, because you see adults fighting over parking stalls. You see adults fighting over groceries in a lineup. Should we speak about Black Friday? Like, there's so many examples of adults that are misbehaving.
Well,
and you're
even
like, wait a minute.
politics, like how awful
Oh,
are
geez.
they acting in politics? We won't get into politics, but how awful is, I mean, that is like the quintessential poster for bullying. I mean,
It's terrible. And when I was studying psychology in college before I dropped out, because I realized I was wasting a lot of money. First of all, because all the stuff I was being taught is accessible on the internet. It's accessible through books on Amazon. So I'm like, I'm going to save my money. I'm going to pursue this so I can put my money elsewhere. And I started researching in psychology before I dropped out that behaviors within adults is driven by society based on region of the world. So, for example, in North America, we're very individualistic.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch our marketing, you'll realize it's all you, how to benefit you, how to make you better, how to make you better than the competition. And I'm like, holy cow, collaboration is key. Like, competition is healthy for sports, but when it comes to business, when it comes to humanity, collaboration is the key. And that's why I said, when I started building my anti-bullying and my youth empowerment business, Bodyguards and Entertainment, was because I realized that in 2012, cyberbullying was on a huge increase. But it wasn't just with kids. Like you mentioned, Greta. Like when I see adults calling her names and saying, "Oh, she's just a mentally ill child," and all the stuff they're saying, I'm like, but I promise you, if you got a phone call from your child's school mentioning what your children are doing, you'd probably be mad at your son or your daughter. But here you are on social media just doing the exact opposite. So you got to lead by example. Whatever strict rules you put in place for your children, you better be the leading example of it. And like I said, my son went through it for numerous years with bullying. My daughter had some situations, but not much. So it's different for each child. Each child. Some children are able to overcome it. And one of the biggest issues I found when I was doing life coaching was parents telling their children, just ignore it. No, you can't ignore it. Children, their minds and their brains are programmed differently than adults. The human brain's developing until you're 26 years old. So if you're having your child who's 6 years old and their brain's still developing, they're not going to be able to say, oh, I can just ignore the name calling. That's not how it works for children. For them, it's fight or flight immediately. So if you can imagine a youth going to school and having that mindset not the mindset, but being in a state of fight or flight all day, you can imagine how stressed they are. And that's why sometimes when kids get home, they're just like mentally fatigued because they have so much stress all day that they're hiding. And I always tell parents, as soon as your children get home, please give them the time and be very specific with the questions you ask. Like ask them questions like, what made you smile today? What made you sad today? Focus on emotions. What made you happy? What made you sad? What did you see? Don't ask them questions like, well, what'd you do today? Kids are not going to remember.
No.
Like they have so much stuff in their mind when they get home. They just want to, release. So I always tell parents, when your kids get home from school, ask them the right questions of what made you happy today? What made you smile? What made you sad? What made, start with those questions and then slowly go into like, what was your favorite subject today? What was your favorite lesson? Make sure that you make the child know that you are more concerned with their emotions than their academics.
Hey, Dave, I think that's your next book. Talking about those questions to ask what to ask your kids when they come home.
It's extremely important because children are not only dealing with bullying, they're dealing with academic pressure. Get your A's. Or sorry, I guess it's not really letters now. It's like numbers. It's like get your 1, 2, 3. Like, number 1 is very bad. So 3 is good and 4 is excellent. So now it's like get your 3s, get your 4s, and that's all parents care about. And I get it because we're all stressed, we're all focused, we're all overwhelmed with work and business. But I'm like, at the end of the day, though, the mental health in regards to academic pressure is so high now that in China, they actually have a school, actually numerous schools have security officers on top of the roof because they found that children or even high school students were going to the top roof and jumping when they failed
Wow.
tests. And it's like, I coached a youth
Isn't
in
that pressure from the
2000.
parents though when
It's a mixture of both the
yeah.
school and the parents. Like, for example, I told one parent who got really mad at me, but I said, you need to stop trying to impress Jack and Joan and just take care of your child. Because I'm like, while you're sitting there trying to tell your friends, oh, my son's going to college or my son's doing this, my daughter's doing that, but maybe your son or daughter don't want to do that. So it's like a lot of parents, and it's not their fault because that's how we've been conditioned. We've been conditioned to go to school, graduate, go to college, graduate, and then give your life away for 40 years. And that's what we're taught. And with my children, it's all passion driven. Like, what do you love to do? Let's do that. Because I'm like, I want to help change the mentality of, listen, your school's marks, they do matter. However, your mental health is more important to me because that's your lifelong. Like, I read a research article a couple of days ago saying that multitasking is damaging regions of the brain that affect your empathy, your compassion, and your memory. So we have so many adults that are lacking empathy and focus because they're trying to multitask because that's what we're living in. And I'm like, well, that's what kids are dealing with too. Like, they're trying to deal with puberty. They're trying to deal with dating and relationships and academic pressure and bullying. Like, it's definitely an epidemic.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're not coaching anymore, but what are some of the things that you are doing right now? I think you mentioned before that you still kind of got your hands in wrestling in a way, with
Most
the
definitely.
podcast. And so what are some of the projects that you're working on now?
So everything that I'm doing now, I'm doing because they're not as mentally exerting, and that way I can preserve my mental health for as much as I can. But everything I do is aligned with my passion. It's just my way of life. Where if I'm not aligned with my passion, I want nothing to do with it. But that's because I'm just sick of the toxicity. So right now I'm working on what's called Squared Circle Rewind podcast, which is a wrestling podcast that we're reviewing every single WWE, WCW, and ECW pay-per-view in chronological order. So my best friend Jesse, he's the memory genius. So he basically tells us, okay, this pay-per-view is next. Watch it, review it, and we just do it in order. We started with Starrcade 1983, and our next episode, which is episode 112, is WWF King of the Ring 1996, where Steve Austin has apparently a big promo of where he brings out Austin 316. So on that podcast, it's just a lot of fun. There is parental advisory on it because my friends do like to swear because it's wrestling. I mean, when you're an adult and you're passionate, swearing brings it a whole, like, you dropped the S-bomb like 12 times when we first started talking to them
Right?
before this podcast. And I love it.
The F-bomb or the S-bomb?
S-bomb, the Sierra bomb.
The F-bomb
I
comes when I
love it.
watch football.
Yeah. So if you're a hardcore wrestling fanatic and you love the old school wrestling, definitely check us out. We're on Spotify. That's, Square Circle Rewind podcast, which is produced by Call in the Ring Media, which is our big overall brand where I do interviews with wrestlers. But the interviews I do with wrestlers is mainly focusing on mental health. Because I understand there's so much shoot interviews, there's so much drama interviews, like he said, she said, all that stuff. I'm like, no, I want the person to tell me, like what they struggle with. And that's inspiration from Lillian Garcia. She has a podcast called Chasing Glory. And it's such an amazing podcast because they talk about mental health, like anxiety, depression, suicide. And it's just, I want wrestling fans to learn to separate the character from the person. And I think that's very important. With those two projects, I'm very busy with. However, I'm also doing, like I said, my Feel Real Journey, which is a community I'm trying to build of people who are struggling with mental health or brain damage and brain injury. And I'm actually going to North Carolina on May 7th to May 9th, 2020, to speak to 400 kids about mental health and concussions and brain injury. So that's my main focus. That's my main goal. Bodyguards United Entertainment. Okay, so that has been built since 2012. However, due to my recent health issues, I've had to pull back a lot of the projects within that. So now Bodyguards United Entertainment is going to be driven just towards social media, where I just feature kids from around the world that are doing amazing things. Because I've learned through my several years of coaching that youths are more inspired and influenced by fellow youths than they are adults.
Mm.
Because whenever an adult says you should do this, they just like, oh, it's an authority thing. But when they see a 16-year-old kid who's winning awards and traveling the world, they're like, oh wow, I can do that. So Bodyguards is all about youth empowerment, youth inspiration. A lot of my life has changed since November because I'm like, okay, before I was doing life coaching, I was doing 40 hours a week doing that. And that was very mentally exhausting because I was dealing with kids who had their neck broken, kids who were in hospital, in and out with suicide, like very serious situations. And I'm glad I was part of their journey and I helped them. But I told all of them, I'm like, listen, I have to focus on me now because I can't pour from an empty cup no more. Excuse me.
Wow.
I can actually share all of these in the comment section too. I'll share all that for you.
Forward to and put them.
Because that's a lot of information to
put them all
forget.
The links to. So, because you are so savvy with digital media and you're everywhere, are you, because you've been a life coach, are you writing new rules for coaching? Because you're really using this medium to coach in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I find that coaching, unfortunately, has a lot of negative attention with it, saying, you're controlling people or you're demanding them. I'm like, no, the best way that I explained coaching was I tie your shoes when they come untied, but you do the walking. That's all it was for me, was I'm just here to guide you. Like, coaching is all about questioning. It's all about knowing what questions to ask and helping the individual find the answer themselves. It's guidance. So I never liked the word coaching. So I was like, how can I change that? Because coaching sounds like you're yelling at them or you're motivating them and you're doing everything for them. Like, you're showing them the play and say, do it. I'm like, no, you're actually guiding them. Like, you're just saying, okay, I'm here to listen to you. And then with your responses, I will formulate a question that will help you think. And I always tell people, I'm like, I don't teach people how to, what to think. I teach them how to think. Like, as individuals, one of my greatest success stories with life coaching was a girl who was in a very abusive relationship, and she literally messaged me as she was having an episode of anxiety, and I helped her get her stuff packed and get out of the house.
Wow.
And I was like, and she's like, Dave, you saved my life. I'm like, no, I did not. I'm like, I just helped you get to the answers that you needed to find. Because when you're having an anxiety episode, you're not thinking clearly. You're basically trying to throw a nickel in the air in the fog and trying to catch it. Like, it's so difficult to think clearly. And that's what my job as a coach was just to help guide you through to the result that you wanted. When you told me, all right, Dave, this is what I want to do. How do I get it? I'm like, so one thing I did was I changed a lot of my vocabulary that is very common amongst coaching, like goal setting. I don't like the term goal because goals can be very confusing to people. Because when someone says, I want to be 125 pounds, I'm like, that's not a goal. That's a result.
Yeah.
That's a result. And now, so I use the words journey and destination, where I'll say, so your goal is your destination and your journey is how you get there. And everyone's like, oh, that's so interesting. I'm like, yeah, because when I started coaching, kids were like, oh, I want to be a gamer. I'm like, okay. And then they would just get so overwhelmed because they don't know how to get there. They're like, I don't know how to get there. I'm like, oh, that's the problem. You're confusing goal with destination. And as a result of that, you're mentally just becoming overwhelmed. So a lot of things that I was doing was, I don't want to say transcending, but it was different because I started realizing, like, wait a minute, internal vocabulary is huge with how you think. And I read Tony Robbins' book, Awake the Giant Within, which is a 600-page book. So it's definitely a commitment to read it, but it's so informative. And it teaches you how to work the brain and how to, how to make memory stronger and habitual routines. And to answer your question earlier, another way that I get through is I have strict routines that I have to follow. And so I just created that as well. But after I left coaching, the one thing that I was getting most of was people were saying, thank you for being different. Because I'm a person where I like to see what's trendy, but then jump on it, but then make my own little imprint on it. And that was one of the biggest changes I made, was changing the word from goals to journey, and just simple changes like that to help people click. Because when I first started coaching, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was terrible within the first 6 months. I had no idea what I was doing. I was resorting back to my football days where I was coaching football. And I was like, this is not working. I'm like, so I had to do a lot more research. So my best advice for people who want to be coaches and who are currently coaches is never forget what you're there to do. And that's just to tie their shoes. Let them walk. They do the journey, but you're just there to say, oh, your shoelace is untied. Here you go. Keep going. That's all it is. It's just have fun with it. Don't be all like, I'm here to save the day. I'm here to rescue you. Because one of the biggest things that I noticed some coaches were doing were they were helping people get away from therapy, away from psychiatry, away from psychology. I'm like, no, you, if that's part of their journey, they have to see a psychologist. You help them set that up. If they have to see a therapist, you help them set that up. Coaches are not replacement for psychiatrists and psychologists. We're just there to help you find where you have to go.
So before we wrap up the broadcast, I want to ask you a final question. Just
oh geez,
just based. I know
you hyped this up. I'm nervous.
I'm just based on the stuff that we've talked about already in the interview. If you could give the audience some advice on how to move their needle forward, to how to help themselves just through the next week, what would that be?
One of my favorite quotes that I created when I was just discharged from rehab was, as long as you are alive, you can adapt and affect change. Now, I think it's very important that when you realize that you're saying, I'm going through something, people always say that in such a negative way, like, oh, I'm going through this, I'm going through that. You don't understand the positivity that's within that message. You're going through it. That means you're actively working on trying to get through it. So just keep going. Every morning you wake, okay, this is really dark, but it's so true. And I love saying it because kids react to it differently than adults, but every morning you wake up is a day closer to when you won't. So you have to have urgency with your life. You have to wake up every morning and say, okay, today's another day. I'm going to do this. And I know it can be hard. External inspiration is useless without internal motivation. You have to find that motivation internally. External inspiration is beautiful. I love being inspiration to a lot of kids and families, but I always tell them, if you don't have that internal motivation, it's useless. And the way you do that is you find your why, that one thing that just makes you happy, that goosebump feeling, and you just focus on that. Because the way that motivation works is you start with your why, and then you focus on it, which creates your vision. And that vision is where you find your natural motivation. So just keep focusing on what you love and what you want to do. And I promise you, you're going to get there. And it's not going to be an easy journey, but you will definitely get there, because you will wake up every morning a winner, and you'll realize, okay, my prize for today is I have another life to live. I have another day to pursue it. Just understand that your struggle does not diminish your worth, period. Like your life has value every single day.
And you're living proof.
I hope so.
Thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate
Not a problem.
I appreciate your time for this broadcast. It was awesome.